Section 2 deals with driving safely. This section is about the general knowledge of commercial driving. This is a test that you have to pass in order to get a permit to be able to go through the training and the skill tests that are the inspection of the vehicle, that is the practical part, the control of the vehicle, and the driving on the road. Here in this section, we are covering the written test or the general knowledge. We are covering how to inspect a vehicle, how to do basic control, how to control your vehicle, driving forward, backwards, making turns. Shifting gears, that's the old-fashioned stuff when we used to have 10 gears. There are still trucks that require 10 gears or 18 gears or 12 gears. You still have to learn how to do that. You have to learn with the double clutching. Seeing, one of the problems with trucks is that you don't have a rear view mirror in the middle of the truck. You have 4 mirrors on the right and 3 mirrors on the left, so you have 7 mirrors. By the time you turn your neck from right to left, you discover that your right side is the blind side. By the time you see something on the right, you turn your neck to the left, something will change. Seeing or scanning the mirrors is a big thing in trucking. It's the difference between life and death. Communicating means communicating with the other drivers, communicating with people on the road, not communicating with your boss or your family. How to signal, how to interpret the signals of others, how to realize the intention of people on the street or the intention of others. Space management means managing the space in front of you, behind you, on the sides, as time grows, as you are driving. Whether you are managing the space during the driving or when you park your truck on a parking lot or in any place. The space is very important because the vehicle is too large. How to control your speed, whether you have to predict when you're supposed to slow down, when you're supposed to speed up. Slowing down is as important as speeding up. Speeding up can save your life in many situations. Slowing down is, of course, the most important thing when you have to slow down. Seeing hazards, how to look 12 seconds in front of you. When we say 12 seconds here, we are not talking about distances. We are talking about the time that you are going to get to that distance. The distant object, because you are driving, the distance and the time are important. So you have to talk about how many seconds in the front of you that hazard is going to impact you, whether something was on the ground, a car is parked on the right shoulder, or a curve you have to make, or trees that are going to fall in the wind, or snow is going to be blown on your way. That is seeing hazards. Distracted drive. A big thing about distracted drivers, you can say all drivers are distracted, whether by intention or unwillingly. Drivers are distracted because they drive 11 hours a day. A human being driving 11 hours a day is an enormous stress on the human health. But here we're talking about the distraction of using cell phones, trying to drink or eat or touch something while you are driving, or thinking about something other than the road. Aggressive drivers and road rage. This is something you really cannot overcome. You are a human being. You are upset, you upset somebody else, people get angry, sometimes you try to chase each other. It is something unfortunate, but it is part of the human nature. But when it exceeds certain limits, it becomes illegal. Night driving, driver fatigue. Night driving poses a serious problem because you don't see too far. You don't see everything around you. You are driving as a try and error. You're hoping that in the dark side no hazard will show up. You're minding your own business, you're having your beams, high and or low beams, you're seeing your tunnel of sight, and suddenly an elk or an animal jumps in front of you out of nowhere from the dark. Another problem at night, the snow doesn't look like snow at night. The glare can look like snow. Or you can confuse the glare for the snow, you lose your life. Driving in the fog, what do you do with the fog? When do you stop? When do you go? Is the fog is going to extend for long distances? Is it the fog that is dangerous? When you see 40, 50 trucks piling on each other because everybody thought he can go through the fog without an accident, and suddenly everybody is piling on everybody. Chain reaction happens not very often, but you see it once a year, twice a year, in a devastating situation. How do you drive in winter on the mountains, on the city, on the streets? The winter poses very serious hazards problem because of the traction, lack of traction, because of the visibility, because of the stress on the human being, because of the stress of the components of the truck. Hot weather is as bad as cold weather. When you drive in Arizona at 125 degrees, if you don't have sufficient water in your truck, if you don't know how to cool yourself properly, you can get heat stroke. It is almost paralysis or brain damage, just because of lack of water. Railroad crossings, believe it or not, a lot of people don't think that's a big deal. I remember once in Oklahoma, I got killed by a train because I forgot the rules. The rules is that the crossing is controlled by signal or by gates. You have to pay attention. You cannot just run on the railroad when there is a flashing red light. Mountain driving is another challenge because of the shoulders are soft, the road is narrow, it's very steep going up, steep going down. You get into unfortunate situation, you get into the wrong mountainous dirt road, there is no place to turn around. Putting the chains is no fun. Putting the chains can kill you, can destroy your hands. Sometimes you have to put the chains. Driving emergencies. You're driving, you're a human being, you need to go to the restroom, you have acute abdominal upset, you have blackout, you don't see, suddenly you see double visions, you have an emergency, you're driving on a road that has no shoulders, the next exit is 10, 15, 50 miles away. You have an emergency, you cannot see because there is snow. Collision mitigation system or radar is covered by the snow, and you have no place to stop to clean anything. That's what we call it driving emergency. Anti-lock braking system, that's ABS. That's what regulates the braking on the 18 wheels, or you can say 16 wheels of the tractor and the trailer's automatic system that prevents the locking of the brakes on one side, a wheel that can make the truck roll over. That system have a certain rules. We are going to discuss it when we come to it. Skid control and recovery. When you ever run into a skid situation, you know how devastating it can be. You know that you are going to die. Suddenly you have no control on the truck, and the truck is going anywhere against your prediction. The control is not working. What do? You just lift your hand, you lift your feet, you let everything go, and the truck will, most probably you can recover. If you do something erratic, you become excited, frightened, you can find yourself in the wrong ditch. Accident procedures. When an accident happens, what are you supposed to do? When fires happen, what are you supposed to do? The use of alcohol, drugs, and the driving and the hazardous material rules. This section contains knowledge, that is general knowledge, and the safe driving information. The air brakes will come on a different chapter. The driving combination will come in a different chapter. The passenger will come in a different chapter. And the hazmat, of course, will come in a different section. We start with the first item in chapter number 2, that is inspecting the vehicle inspection. Why inspect? Because of the safety. You inspect your vehicle for yourself and for others on the road and for the property. A vehicle defect found during an inspection could save you problems later. For example, one of the funny things when you learn how to drive, you inspect everything and you forgot the mirrors. You forgot to adjust the mirrors. Then you take over the yard, you are on the highway, and suddenly you discover that the mirrors need adjustment. If you remember how to adjustment with your fingers or with your hand, if you have automatic adjustment, that is a distraction. So when you inspect, you go through a very standard procedure. Remember that the truck is a human being. The most important thing is the truck. It's vision, you have to see. So you have to have the wipers, the glass, the windows, the mirrors. Then you go through the mechanical process. Imagine a truck is a human being. You cannot walk on the street when you are blind. You have to be able to see. You cannot walk on the street if your neck is hurting badly. You cannot turn right or left. So imagine a truck is a human being. First, you have to have vision, the wipers, the window, the controls. You have to make sure the tires can hold the truck. If you have a flat tire or low pressure tire, it's going to cause you problems. Then you have to go through the mechanical component of inspection. Who is going to inspect the truck? The person who drives the truck. The driver have to learn how to inspect the truck. A lot of seasoned drivers, they tell you, I do not want to inspect the truck for me. I wanted to inspect my own truck because that is my own life. If there is a defect found in your truck by highway troopers, federal or state inspectors, you get what you call it out of service. Out of service means you need to not to drive a truck until you fix the problem. It happens to me once in Oregon, on Route 97 in the morning. I lost 2 tires on the trailer because it was very cold. I did not get out to check the tires, extremely cold. First inspection station, they stopped me, they pulled me to the side, out of service, and I think I got 2 points from the company for failing to get out and look at the tires. The brakes were frozen when I took off without going out to check if they were spinning. What happened, it was dark in the morning and cold, and inspecting tires in the morning in extreme cold is no fun. Type of vehicle inspections. We discussed about what to inspect. Now we're talking about what types of inspection. As we said, you inspect to avoid having a crash, having to stop in the middle of the highway to adjust something, having to deal with an emergency that can be prevented. During a trip, of course, you have to inspect before you start the trip, which we call it pre-trip. Inspection is as good as your knowledge. If you educated yourself, if you know how the truck operates, when we come to it, the truck have systems like a human being. When you are walking, that is a suspension of the truck. That have tires, that have frames that hold the truck. When you turn from side to side with your own eyes, with your own legs, that's what you call it a steering mechanism of the truck. What cools your body, the truck has a cooling system, which we call it the cooling system, the radiator and the fluids. The truck have a drive system like your heart, your muscles. That's the engine and the transmission. So you have to deal with the truck as a group of systems. The truck have to stop. So it has a system of braking mechanism from the engine to the compressor to the air lines to the brakes on the brake drums and the brakes on the wheels. To inspect the tires, During the trip, for safety, you should watch gauges for signs, gauges which means warning. Watch gauges for signs of trouble. Use your senses to check for problem. Senses which means look with your eyes, listen with your ears, smell with your nose, feel with your mind. Check critical items when you stop. What are the critical items? The tires, the wheels, and the rims. Those hold the truck on the road. The braking system that will make you stop when you need to stop so you don't hit somebody. The lights and the reflectors that will make you see others and others see you. Brake and electrical connection of the trailer, because the trailer is separate from the truck. You need to make sure the trailer and the truck are communicating. Electrical and air pressure connections. Trailer coupling device, that is the fifth wheel that couples the trailer and the tractor, and other coupling device if you have other trailers. Cargo securement. Cargo securement is not only for flat beds. If you hold, say, in the whole trailer, 5 or 4 rolls of paper, each roll is over 2 or 3 tons. These rolls, they have to be secured with certain federal rules inside the trailer so you don't slide inside the trailer when you make a turn. In places like California and I-5, people that are coming from Oregon with paper rolls that are manufactured in Oregon, on the mountain, a roll that moves inside the trailer, rolls over the trailer, the tractor. You have 2-3 tractors crashing because of insecure cargo inside the trailer. The cargo securement is a very big thing in the balance of that complex commercial vehicle. After the trip, before you start another day, you need to write your own, call it motor vehicle inspection reports, to give it to your shop, or if you are not going to the shop, you need to do the inspection after the trip to be able to fix it in the morning. So as a matter of fact, you are inspecting before the trip, during the trip, and after the trip. And any time you have a chance to get out and look at your vehicle, because that is your life and the life of others. What to look for? Now you know why you inspect, you know the type of inspections. When you inspect, what to look for. First, let us have the tires. Too much or too little air pressure. You're driving in Utah in the cold weather, the pressure goes low because it's very cold. Cross from Utah to Arizona, the temperature goes up, the pressure goes up. The pressure is extremely high. You have to release air from the tires. If the pressure is too low, you have to add air to the tires. Of course, you ask, where do you get air from? Every truck driver will tell you, carry your own hose. 50 feet long hose, you put it on your truck. When you lose air, you use the truck air pressure from the glad handles. You connect it to your hose and you inflate your tires. Bad wear is another problem. You have to go around the tire. Stick to the rules. The rules is that everything other than the steer have to be 2/30 seconds of an inch. The steer have to be 4/30 seconds of an inch. That is in the front. That is the minimum. Another thing, you have to make sure the wear is even. If you have 2 or 3 batches of deep wear, you have to change the tire. You have to predict that tire is going to rupture on it. So the nature of the wear have to be even. It cannot be excessive. It cannot be on batches. The tire is cut or damaged. Look for that from your side outside, or the driving surface, or the inside. The tread separation, which means the tire is worn badly or you drive on a flat tire, there will be separation in the tread that is not even, which means it tells you the structure, the frame of the tire have collapsed and the tire is is about to explode. If the two tires in the same wheel come in contact with each other, like in the case of bias ply tires or a flat tire, the two tires will catch fire. If the tire touches the vehicle, means the tire have a bulge or too flat to hold itself vertical, it will cause fire. Radial and bias ply tires used together. I did not know anything about radial and bias until almost 7 years into my training. What is radial and what is bias? Bias ply. Radial means the tire is supported from the side with long wires in the radius of the tire. The bias means the support of the surface on the ground is biased, which means angled like this. The radial bias are very good in solid surface, concrete. The bias ply tires are very good on the dirt. If you drive on a concrete or asphalt with a bias ply tires, you are going to see the tire is bouncing right and left and dancing on the road. The valve stem can be a nightmare because check the tire everywhere, the tire is okay. Where is the leak come from? Either the valve is cracked, the valve have dirt stem and it leaks. Regrooved or recapped or retreaded tires on the front. Remember, the front cannot be regrooved or recapped or retreaded. Front have always to be the original tires made in the factory, special for the front, because the front is the most serious steering. So you cannot have recapped or retreaded or regrooved tire on the front because of the consistency of the rubber and the structure of the steel wires that hold the rubber together are tougher and rugged, enable the steering mechanism to be performed without having the tire losing solid structures that keep it firm. The wheel and rim problems. The wheel is the metal round part that holds the rubber on it. What you look for the rims? Damaged rims. Damaged, which means the metal is not even, there is a crack, there is a bend on the rim is not going to hold the rubber on it. Remember, most of the tires that have no tubes are attached to the rim by one thing and one thing only. That the rim have to be round, even and clean, such that the rubber is stuck to it simply by surface tension and by the air pressure inside the tire. If there is dirt or crack in the rim, or the rim is not even, the tire is not going to hold the air on the tire and is going to go flat. Rust around wheel nuts. The nuts are loose, check tightness. You have to look at the nuts, the 10 nuts. If there is rust, it means there is water going through them, which means because the nuts are not tight enough. If the nuts are very tight, you will not allow the water to go through, and the water and the steel will cause rust, the brown iron oxide. So sometimes you have to put your hand on the tire to check it, to make sure it is not loose. You say, well, is my hand strong enough? You can use a wrench to make sure the tires are not loose. Using clamps or spacer. Spacer is the cylinders that go between the two wheels when you have a double, that keep the two rims, the two wheels stable when the truck runs. The studs are the long screws that comes from the frame where the rim have to be attached to it. You have to look for any missing clamps, spacers, studs, or lugs. Mismatched, bent, or cracked lock rings. The lock rings are the rings that are used to secure the tire on the rim. Nobody likes those lock rings anymore. Some wheels have lock rings, some wheels don't. The wheels that don't have lock rings, the tire on the wheel, and when you inflate it, it will expand and it fills the space on the rim. Some old rims, they don't have this kind of mechanism. You have one side round, the other side have an edge. You put the tire on it and you put the ring before you inflate the tire. In some countries, when the rim breaks, people have no money, they try to weld them. When you weld them, you run into problem. The consistency of the metal is not the same. So when it gets hot, you have difference in the heat expansion of the two parts of the metal or the welding material, and can rupture while driving. Brake drums or shoes, those are inside the wheels. So you have to go under the truck to see them. The shoes are attached to the drums. From the inside you have to lay in your back and crawl under the truck to see them. The drum has inside either two chambers or one chamber and it have rubber diaphragm. If the diaphragm is ruptured inside or rusted because of its old use, it will leak air, so the brakes won't work. Whether the emergency brakes are supplied by the red air line or the surface brakes that are supplied by the blue air line. Checking the brakes drums will solve you the problem. When you get locked wheel, you release the brakes, you try to drive your truck, you discover that one of the wheels is locked. You go under to find why it is locked. You discover that the emergency brake is not released because the diaphragm has a hole in it. You have to replace the entire drum. Or the shoes are worn so bad, when the brake pin expands to push the brakes, to turn the brakes, there is no much braking and you cannot stop, you cannot brake on that side. Uneven shoes means uneven braking. And leaking drums or bad brake drums means you have a locked wheel, means you are going to lose the tires, means you cannot drive the truck. So the drums either cracked or the shoe bad with oil, grease or brake fluid on them. Where does the grease come from? On the drive, the grease comes from the fifth wheel, if the driver has bad habits, or can come from any other part, from either the truck or from the trailer. Worn shoes are dangerous if they are thin, missing or broken. The shoes have to be thick because the truck is too big. The thickness of the shoes means they can dissipate heat and they can create enough friction to stop the drums from spinning. Remember, the shoes, two parts. The pads designed for the friction and the metal that holds the pads, the shoes pads. Metal is supposed to have a structural function to hold the pads and thermal function to cool the pads. Now we go to the steering mechanism. We talk about the brakes, the drums, the tire. Now we're talking about the steering defect. Missing nuts, cutter keys are the pins, the very long two double pins, and that they go in the hole of to hold the nut in place. It's supposed to hold the nut from sliding out, or any other part that's missing on the steering system can mean the nut can get lost and the mechanism of steering can fail. Bent, loose or broken parts such as steering column or the steering gearbox. The steering gearbox is a cylinder that attached to the steering column and it has two hoses coming from the power steering pump, one inlet and one outlet, transfer the motion from the steering column to the wheels. We call it the steering gearbox. Or the tie rods. The tie rods are the long rods under connecting to the right and left wheels, or they push the wheels can rotate, can spin around their axis. Call them tie rods. Tie the two wheels together. If power steering equipped, check hoses, pumps, and the fluid level. Most of the trucks, because they are too heavy, they have to have a power steering pump. They have to have a fluid inside it. What does the power steering pump do? It pushes the steering oil or the steering fluid at high pressure so it can keep the gears from falling on each other and being lubricated so it can be easy to steer the truck. Steering wheel belay, which means you hold the steering wheel and you see how much it can belay. If it is more than 10 degrees, approximately 2 inches movement. 2 inches is not that much. You hold the steering to see if it has too much play in it or not. Of course, you can only tell by knowing what you have before and what you have now. 2-inch movement at the rim of a 20-inch steering wheel can make it harder to steer. You keep turning and you cannot get it right where you want it to get. The steering mechanism. You put your hand here on the steering wheels. The steering wheel has linkage. The steering shaft The steering shaft has a gearbox right here, a cylinder, and there is a hydraulic fluid reservoir. That reservoir have two hoses going to the power steering gearbox. The power steering has a linkage coming out of it. You call it Batman arm. The Batman arm is that moves like this from the power steering box. The Batman arm have a linkage connected to the tie rods. The tie rods are going from one side to another side. That is connected to the wheels, and you have the steering knuckle. The knuckle is where the steer will rotate around. Where does the steering system gets its support? It gets its support from the suspension system, the frame that holds everything together. You have to look at the defect of the suspension system. The suspension in the truck has about 2 or 3 kind of suspension. The stainless steel leaves or the springs, they call it leaf springs. This is a very old kind of suspension that was created from the birth of locomotive technology. And you have the oil or hydraulic shock absorber that try to lessen the shock due to the abrupt vertical acceleration. And sometimes you have airbags. Sometimes you see auxiliary spring. The load is too heavy, primary spring or the main spring expanded completely, the auxiliary spring will take over. You have to make sure all the nuts are tight and secure, especially when your truck falls in a ditch or driving on a rough road, on the mountain or a dirt road. All these components can break easily. The nuts can break easily. I have 2 nuts broke between the frame, the chassis, and the suspension. You have to look at the integrity of the components. If something is missing, cracked or broken spring hanger. The spring hanger is what hangs the spring. That is a spring hanger. If that is cracked, it will be cracked when you drive on the mountains, or you have an old truck, or the truck has bad maintenance. If you have broken spring leaf, you will be taken out of service because the truck cannot be balanced. Leaking shock absorber. You see oil coming out of the shock absorber means the piston is gone. Torque rod or arm U-bolts, all these components, U-bolts is what holds the spring leaves together. As we discussed here, you have stainless steel spring suspension, you have oil piston suspension, and you have air suspension. You have to watch all these components to make sure everything is in place, there is no leak, there is no crack, and there is no rupture in the bellows. Bellows are rubber. Either the bellows are ruptured or the metal support is cracked. The mechanics are very good in spotting a cracked metal support. If you have an acute sudden descent in a ditch, it can crack any of these metal support of the bellows. Always looking for loose means something that is connected but it is loose. Cracked means it is broken, you can see it. Or missing frame member. Member means either a nut or an arm, any component that's missing. So the 3 things you're looking for is something loose. Loose, you have to put your hand to make sure it is loose. If it is cracked or broken or missing in front of you, or if there is a leak, oil leak. Those are the 3 things that when you inspect the solid parts of the system, you have to look for. Another system, that is the exhaust system, where the gases of the engine after burning have to be treated in a system of filters. A broken exhaust system can let poison fumes into the cab sleeper. That's what you call it, carbon monoxide poisoning. You hear about many accidents of a driver sleeping in the truck. In the morning he is dead because the engine was running. The carbon monoxide was released, accumulated inside the cabin, and killed the driver. Loose, broken, or missing exhaust pipe, muffler, tailpipe, or vertical sticks. Something is loose or missing. Loose, broken, or missing mounting brackets, clamps, bolts, and nuts. The mounting brackets, if they are loose, the pipes will crack or break or hit something that can catch fire. system parts rubbing against fuel line. If you have any missing bracket or spacer or clamps, you do not want the hot exhaust tube to be running against the fuel line or the tires or other moving part of the vehicle, because that can cause fire. Exhaust system parts that are leaking. Leaking means you can smell something where it's not supposed to be smelled. From the beginning, the inlet to the exit of the exhaust system, you should not have leak.